An event handler is a piece of code that is triggered by something happening. In the previous lesson, you worked with the page load event handler, which runs whenever a page loads. In this lesson, you'll add some more event handlers to the page. To begin, open the C# test sample file from your sample files folder. And open default.aspx in Design View. Now add a button control from the Standard category of the toolbox. Place it after the Label control that you added in Lesson 3.1. Now set the ID property of the new button to Button Change Text. Now you're going to add a click event handler to the button. First, make sure that you're in Design View, then select the button so that Button Change Text appears in the Properties window, and click the Events button at the top of the Properties window. Here you can see a list of the possible events for the button control. To add a click event handler, double-click in the empty box next to Click. You are automatically taken to the code behind file of default.aspx, where some code has been automatically added. Note that you can create an event handler very quickly by simply double-clicking on a control. This will automatically create an event handler for the control's default event. All controls have a default event representing the event that is most often used by that control. In the case of the button control, the default event is click. This means that you can easily add a click event handler to a button control by simply double-clicking on it. The code that has been automatically added is an event handler for the button's click event. When the button is clicked, any code between the curly brackets will run. Add the following code to the new event handler. Label output .text equals text changed. Now view the page in your browser and click the button. The text in the label control changes. This works because the click event happens after the page load event. It isn't obvious to the user, but when you click the button, both the page load and click events try to set the text property of the label control. The click event wins because events are always processed in a certain order. Whenever the button is clicked, the page reloads and the page load event sets the label control's text to Hello World. At a later point in the process, the click event runs and sets the label control's text property to text changed. On a real website, you'd probably try to avoid this and make sure that only one piece of code affects the label control at a time. Now close your web browser and return to Visual Studio. Next, open default.aspx in Design View and add a calendar control to the page from the Standard category of the toolbox. Set the ID property of the new calendar to Calendar Select. Note that if your Properties window is still displaying Events, you will have to switch back to Properties by clicking the Properties icon. Now add an event handler for the Selection Changed event of the new calendar. In the same way as you did for the button control, select the calendar control in Design View, and then click the Events button in the Properties window. As you can see, the calendar control has a different set of events to the button control. You'll learn more about the events of different controls in Session 4. Double-click in the empty box next to Selection Changed to add an event handler for the Selection Changed event. The Selection Changed event happens when the user selects a date from the calendar. Now add the following code to the new event handler that has been automatically generated. Label output .text equals calendar select .selected date .toString. This code will set the text property of your label control to the date that was selected in the calendar. You will learn more about toString in Lesson 5.9. Now view the page in your browser and click a date in the calendar. The event handler code runs, and the label control displays the date that you selected. Close your web browser now. Although the vast majority of ASP.NET events can be accessed through Design View, you might be wondering where you can click to set page events like Page Load. Unfortunately, it's not possible to access these events through the designer, so you have to type them in manually if you want to use them. The important missing events include Page Init, which happens before Page Load, Page Pre-Render, which happens after page load just before the page's controls are converted into HTML code, and Page Unload, which is the last event in the page lifecycle and happens after the page has been sent to the user. You won't be using any of these events in this course, but it is good to be aware of their existence. Close Visual Studio now, and you've now completed Lesson 3.2. Add event handlers to controls.